Hello and welcome to Addiction Recovery Revolution. I'm your host, Debbie Nelson, and today I'm introducing a wonderful program that is probably the most integrative recovery program I've found. And the founder is joining us today, Joe Eisele with Inner Balance Health Center.
Hi, Debbie.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. I'm glad to be on, and thank you for taking this time to do this video.
You know, I think I wish that I'd found you when I was seeking treatment. This is information that I've learned on my own, and I always like to do a disclosure, especially when I'm featuring a treatment facility, that no one pays to be on this program. Part of the reason is I want it to be a non-biased platform, and that it's not treatment facilities who are paying for advertisement or endorsement. Part of the reason I have learned about Joe is his affiliation with the Alliance for Addiction Solutions. And I would say that your program is by far the most comprehensive when it comes to a holistic approach. So I always like to start out just because, Joe, I think your story is so relevant as to your own journey and to why you have such an amazing program.
Well, thank you. I'm hoping that it will be helpful for your viewers today. Thank you. You want me to delve into it?
Delve in. Just give us the lowdown, and you know, you obviously, everyone sees someone now. It's like they see me or see you and they think, oh, well, they've never dealt with anything like this.
Right. That's what, when I tell people today that know me what my past was, they don't believe it. They said that couldn't be. But that's exactly what drugs and alcohol drive us to. What they don't do is they don't allow us to live up to our potential. And so how I got started, I was in Southern California. I grew up there. My family life was fine. My mom and dad they were typical. They weren't really feeling, they didn't talk a lot about feelings, but they took us on vacation and they did their best. My mom did her best to take care of me. But when I was a young kid, I remember a couple things. I remember I moved to a new school. I was about 13. I was kind of a shy kid. It was hard for me to get my thoughts into words. I loved just playing alone by myself or with my brother at home, but I wasn't very good in crowds. And I moved to a new school, and that brought up some of its own anxiety. But the thing I remember is when I was younger, and whatever age, it was a younger age, maybe even than that, but I started really eating a lot of sugar. For example, I would wake up in the morning and my mother would give me a bowl of some type of cereal, probably with sugar on it. And she'd put a couple teaspoons of sugar in there. And then when she wasn't looking, I'd put about 6 more teaspoons of sugar in that cereal. And then I'd eat the cereal. And at the bottom of that bowl was a little bit of milk with a whole bunch of sugar. And I remember drinking that down. And then I'd go to school and I would be tired in school. I'd be falling asleep in class. And the teacher would be sending me to the nurse's office. They couldn't figure it out. And after class was over, I remember I gravitated to the kind of soda drinks that had caffeine in them. And I could remember drinking 2, 3, maybe even 4 of those a day. And especially drinking one like about 7 or 8 at night. And then I wouldn't sleep very well. I'd stay up until about 2 or 3 in the morning because I couldn't sleep. I developed severe night terrors. Every night for several years, I thought there was somebody in the house with a knife. Every time the wind would blow or creaky sounds, I'd think somebody was in the house or coming into the house. And it was, I know we all have traumas in our life, and our traumas can be different. Traumas can be growing up with an abusive parent or a soldier going off to war and coming back after traumatic experience in war. As youngsters, we all have trauma. And so that's not unusual. I'm not an unusual person, but if you start putting this puzzle together, being shy, eating a lot of sugar, a lot of caffeine, having night terrors, and then how I got into it, I was home one one day with a real bad cold. I was coughing and coughing, and my mom came in. I was watching television, and she came in and said, "Here, take this down." And I swallowed this syrupy stuff. It was kind of sweet. In about 30 or 45 minutes, this incredible feeling came over me of just numbness or just a high. And my mom went out to do some shopping, and I just sat there for probably 4 hours staring at that TV without even changing the channel, not even knowing what was on. That feeling wore off. The next day, I was coughing and coughing. Here comes more of this red liquid and that out of that bottle of codeine cough syrup, and I got the same kind of feeling. And I loved that feeling. I really, really liked that feeling. And the cough went away. I went back to school, but I couldn't get that thought out of my mind of what that liquid did for me. So a few weeks later, when my mom was out shopping, I remember sneaking down into her bathroom and opened up the medicine cabinet, and sure enough, here's that red bottle of codeine cough syrup. And I started swigging a little bit. Every few days I'd swig a little bit to get that feeling. But the liquid was going down, so I got a little bit nervous. So one day when I was in there, I noticed right next to that bottle was this pill bottle. And I looked at and read the label, and it said, take one every 4 hours for pain. So I thought, wow, if that liquid made me feel great, I wonder what this was going to do. And I was a little bit nervous, but it was being prescribed by my uncle. He was a physician, and I knew he wouldn't be giving my mother anything that was dangerous. So I took about 3 out of there, and I remember taking one that night, and I got a different good kind of feeling from that Darvon. That was kind of the drug of choice back then. But that started my journey into a 20-year addiction to all kinds of drugs and alcohol. I started gravitating in high school towards kids who would drink and use drugs like I did. And honestly, my high school years, I didn't think there was a problem because all of us kids were doing the same thing. We were drinking a lot on the weekend. We were taking pills from our parents' medicine cabinet, getting high, getting loaded. My grades were suffering, but there was nothing other than that unusual. And I just thought I was having a hard time studying. But it was after, and I made a lot of friends. That's the thing that I loved about those chemicals. Being a shy kid, when I drank and took, amphetamines and esketrol and speed and those kind of things, my life got better. I started making a lot of friends. I got girlfriends, although I lost one in high school because of my drinking, but it wasn't her. It wasn't my drinking. It was she just didn't know how to party. But I made a lot of friends, and it wasn't a bad time in that sense. It wasn't until I got out of high school, and I really wasn't sure what I was going to do with myself. But a friend of mine and I's parents got together. Tony Miller. He and his parents got together and said, "You guys need to go off to college." So we enrolled in Santa Monica College. We got an apartment, and that's when all heck broke loose. That's when the heavy partying started, a lot of heavy drugs that I hadn't been using before that. And it seemed like a lot of the kids in that apartment complex partied a lot, but not like Tony and I. Tony and I always went overboard. It was always until the wee hours of the night, and we just loved to stay up as long as we could. And that started to really take a toll on my ability to study. And I couldn't. I tried for about a year and a half. Finally had to drop out of college because I couldn't study. My mind would not think straight. When I was on these chemicals, my life seemed okay. In other words, my racing thoughts would slow down, my depression would go away, my anxiety would go away. And it was when the chemicals wore off the next day or whenever that I felt awful, that I didn't feel like I fit. That shyness was there. My mind would race, couldn't sleep very well at night. And so what I came to understand was those chemicals that were a solution to the problems that I had in my life. And I started doing, I bought a PDR that would tell me what kind of drugs or what, and what kind of side effects they would have. I didn't want to take anything that would kill me, but I sure, so I was trying to be careful, but I was always going overboard, drinking way too much. When I got, to be 21, going to bars, hanging out in bars a lot. And now real problems started to happen in my life, not being able to, having to drop out of school, not being able to keep jobs. I'd lose jobs because of my chemical use. Girlfriends, I'd get a girlfriend and I'd lose a girlfriend. It was all around my drinking and drug use. They couldn't tolerate it, and I wasn't going to give it up, so we parted ways. I started having thoughts of maybe there's something wrong with my brain, and so I got my folks. I checked into UCLA psych ward. And they didn't know how to treat addictions. They didn't even address the addiction. This is, my God, this is years ago. I'm 71 now, so that would have been, I was about 21, 22 maybe. And they just would focus on your emotional problems. If we can straighten out your emotional problems, your family issues, and you'll be fine. Well, I would kind of do okay in the facility. I'd make friends and we'd sit in group and talk about stuff. But when I got out, I would leave those facilities with sleeping pills, and another couple medications, and then I'd start drinking. I started getting in trouble with the police. I would be in Santa Monica. I'd be closing the Boathouse or the Golden Rooster, these bars, and I'd be stumbling around Santa Monica drunk, not being able to find my car, passing out in a phone booth, trying to call Tony to come pick me up, and they'd throw you in jail overnight and let you go the next day, just sober up, and there's no big deal. But I did get a DUI, and I did not lose my license. I probably should have. So all of these consequences are happening from my chemical use. To make a long story short, I ended up in 3 more psych hospitals, the worst being Camarillo State Hospital. And that's when I was really out of control with a lot of different drugs, elephant tranquilizer, LSD, and alcohol. And now I was definitely physically addicted, because when I would stop, I was addicted 10 years to Valium. I had 2 doctors I was getting the medication from. One of them he knew what he was doing, and he ended up going to prison because he was in Venice, California, and he would give you anything you wanted. Kids on a Friday were lined up outside his office to get their drugs for the weekend, and I was one of them. I had another doctor on Salmon City, Dr. Hall. He was a good guy. I don't know if he knew what he was doing, but he had me. I was on 4 different medications. I told him I needed energy. He gave me esketrol, which back then was a bad drug. It was speed cut with phenobarbital. Pharmacists finally got it outlawed because it was so addictive. But I esketrol. He gave me Valium to relax. He gave me chlorohydrate sleeping pills to sleep, and there's one other medication. But so I was really, really out of it with all these drugs and alcohol. And then I finally, the last for 15 years, I was in Southern California. In the last year of that period, I was really out of control. I lost my apartment. I was traveling around in a suitcase. And occasionally I'd go back over that period. My mom would take me in, feed me for a week or 2 weeks, and I'd rest. And then I'd go back out and do the same stuff all over again. I had no solution to how bad I felt when I stopped using. And I wasn't able to stop the Valium because I was on those for about 10 years, and I was physically addicted without a doubt. So I was really out of control. I was going from friend to friend of trying to find places to stay, and we'd either get in a fight or I'd steal their drugs or something, and I'd have to move on. I ended up meeting a cab driver, and we went partying, drinking, and drugging all around Hollywood for about a week. And then I was really out of my mind. It was scary. My brother knew it, and he told my mom, and they said, we got to do something. So he called me and he said, Joe, do you want to go to the horse track, Santa Anita, on Sunday? And I said, yeah, well, that'll be fun. So all right, pick me up. So they picked me up, but they had no intention of taking me to the horse track. They took me back to Brockman Memorial, one of the psych hospitals I was in. And I didn't go in with them, but I can imagine they went in to show the doctors or the people, admission people, we want to admit this guy because he's on all these illegal drugs and prescription drugs. Well, they wouldn't admit me. They probably told him something like, we're not the police, you got to get out of here. So they took my suitcase and my drugs and put them in the waiting room and kicked me out of the car and told me, you're going in there, we don't know what you're going to do, but you got to go in there. So I went in there, and I'm really feeling bad because it was the next day off of pretty bad binge. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to go. I had $100 in my pocket, and I figured I'll call my mom. So, because she always took me back in. So I called my mom, and I said, "Mom, I think I need help. I'm in bad shape." And all of a sudden I hear the tears on the other end of the phone, and she's crying, and she says, "Joe, you're killing yourself. You're killing me. I can't go through this anymore." She said, she didn't say a one-way ticket, but she said, "I'll buy you a ticket to Colorado." I had a cousin out here who'd been in AA for a number of years. So that was her last resort, because I'd been in all those mental institutions and they never touched my addiction. Whether I'd been ready or not, I don't know. But so she asked me where I was, and I wasn't sure. So I put my $100 on the phone booth. I went around the corner to find out where I was. And when I came back, somebody had stole my $100, and I'm totally broke. So I said, "All right, I'll take the ticket." And so my brother came back, picked me up, took me to the airport, and it was in the winter, and I had summer. Southern California closed. It was like a snowstorm, and I landed in Denver, and I hated it. It was cold. I was starting to go through withdrawals, and I was looking for my drugs, and they were gone. And I found out later my brother had taken them out of my bag at the airport so I wouldn't have them. And that was kind of a mistake, because now I'm really going through pretty bad withdrawals. But so my cousin took me up to her house in Fort Collins, put me in her unfinished basement on a concrete pad floor with a mattress and water, and left me there for 3 days. And I mean, she was checking on me, but I was hallucinating. I was seeing bugs come out of the wall. Very bad diarrhea and throwing up. And the third day she got really scared. So she took me to see this psychiatrist she knew, had worked with, and he knew about alcoholism. And I went into his office, and he said, "How can I help you, young man?" And I couldn't talk. I couldn't speak. So he immediately put me in the hospital. Unfortunately, they did not know how to detox people off benzos back then. What they gave me is I think it was Haldol or some old antidepressant, which didn't do a thing. So for 7 days, I just shook, and they gave me IVs and fed me. And then he suggested I go to treatment, a traditional treatment center up in Estes Park. I went up there, and it was a traditional talk therapy 12-step program, but I tried, and I knew that by now chemicals were really causing me headache, but I still felt, completely out. I was anxious. I couldn't sleep more than an hour a night, depressed, but I was trying. I really knew I had to try, and I did. And when I came out, I worked at it. I went to AA a little bit on and off, in meetings, and I didn't do the sponsor stuff. I didn't hang around much, but I gave it an effort. I basically hung around the young people I made friends with in the treatment center, and that was a big mistake, because one by one they started relapsing in Denver. So I was sober 6 months and then relapsed. I couldn't tolerate the pain. I went to a dentist for some dental work, and I kind of knew I shouldn't take this medication that he said, "Here, take this, it'll help with the pain." I went home, and I was set up, because here's something in my hands that I know is going to take away this pain. So I ended up taking them, and that set me off into a 3-year relapse, on and off. I wasn't using drugs at that time, but alcohol on and off, in and out of AA, not being able to stay, just anxiety, not sleeping for 3 years, and drinking. And this is the insanity of it. Deborah, I would go to the Safeway, and I'd buy those little bottles of peppermint extract that had 90% alcohol in it. I would drink those, and I was convinced I wasn't drinking because I wasn't at a liquor store. I wasn't going to a bar. I was getting this out of a grocery store. And I was just trying to get some kind of relief for how bad I felt. I did want to be sober, but I couldn't tolerate who I was, what was going on in my brain, and the physical discomfort that I was having. So 3 years that relapse on and off. I went to Chicago. Well, I went back to treatment. I went into treatment again, the same facility, same 12-step, the talk therapy, and they. And then when I came out, I went to visit this gal I knew in Chicago, and I relapsed, went on a horrible binge back there. Came back, and the doctor friend wouldn't give me any medication for withdrawal. They wouldn't let me back in treatment. I had nowhere to go. So one night I was in my beat up old Oldsmobile, and I was driving from Fort Collins to Loveland. It's about a 15, 20-minute drive. I was going to an AA meeting down there because I had nowhere else to go. And this is kind of, I don't know if it's spiritual or that kind of intervening kind of stuff, but I was screaming at the top of my lungs on the way down, angry. God, if there's a God, why are you doing this to me? Why is my life so messed up? And then I break down in tears. I got to the meeting. It was a small meeting, about 10 people. And I usually didn't share meetings, and I wasn't going to share in that meeting. But when they called on me, I said, my name's Joe, and I'm an alcoholic, and I'm going to die. I don't know what to do. I can't stop drinking, and I don't know. And there's a little old lady sitting next to me, Eisele Stevens. She's since passed, but she had a lot of good sobriety. She knew me, not a lot, but she knew me. And she looked at me and says, Joe, you've got to get a sponsor. That clicked that night. I said, all right, Eisele. So I went and got a sponsor that night. And that sponsor and AA really was it started my sobriety. It started my sobriety because I think what I want people to hear is who have an addiction is we've got to stop using these chemicals or you'll never find out why you're depressed, why you're anxious, why you can't sleep. And I knew that. I knew there was something different about me than my sponsor because when he sobered up, it was fine. I mean, he went to AA, he did well, his family, and he didn't have the kind of issues I had. So I got sober, worked with a sponsor, but I was still in bad shape. And I was eating horrible. I was eating McDonald's and Kentucky Fried Chicken. I drinking probably a 6-pack of pop a day, smoking a pack of cigarettes. So I was really unhealthy. But one day, after about 6 months into my sobriety, I was in a bookstore and I picked up a book, and it interested me because it was talking about the thyroid. It had some symptoms on the cover, and it was a book by Dr. Broda Barnes. He was kind of a pioneer in looking at the thyroid and looking at diagnosing it in a different way, not totally dependent on lab work, but more on symptoms that a person had. And I had all those symptoms. As a kid, I was constantly cold. I remember not wanting to get out of the bathtub in the morning when I had to go to school because it's so warm. I had a lot of covers on my bed, and I was depressed and I couldn't sleep. I had all the symptoms. So I went down and found a doctor in Castle Rock that would treat me. And sure enough, I mean, he came from the website, Barnes website, and sure enough, he said, "Yeah, you got all." And he didn't have to do lab work. He said, "I'll just try some medication," and he did, and it helped a little bit. It helped a lot. I mean, it probably took about 30% of what I was struggling with away. But then that got me interested. If that was something that was wrong with me, maybe there's some other stuff going on. And that's when then I found a few months later, I found a doctor in Denver, Terry Grossman, who just started a holistic clinic. And I went down and he did a lot of tests and he found out that I had adrenal exhaustion from all the drug and alcohol addiction and the sugar and all that stuff that just weakened the adrenal function. I was low in pregnenolone for memory and concentration. I was low in DHEA. I was low in testosterone. So he started me on some DHEA and some testosterone. But he also found out that my neurotransmitters were way out of whack. There's 3 neurotransmitters that are paramount, like serotonin receptors, the GABA receptors, and the dopamine receptors. Those are all for mood and mental stability. And what are the precursors? What feed those are amino acids. These essential amino acids that our body can't make. We have to get from food. Well, I was eating horrible, and I was destroying my gut, and I wasn't breaking down. You have to break down these proteins in your gut to get these amino acids. Then they cross the blood-brain barrier, and they convert to tryptophan, converts to serotonin, glutamine converts to GABA, tyrosine to phenylalanine. So he put me on a blend of amino acids. He also found out I had mercury, lead, and arsenic in my blood, so in my body. And so it took me, I think it was 8 weeks of chelation therapy where you'd hook with an IV, take some DMSO, this substance that would chelate these heavy metals out. And then I got into the field in a kind of a roundabout way. I didn't really know what I was going to do with my life. I was car sailing, I was a salesman, I was doing other stuff to try to make a living. But I saw an ad one day for it was a youth home. It's called Larico Youth Home on Matthew Street. It was a home for kids who had learning problems, and these kids would come and stay in this facility, and the teachers would teach them, but they get a lot of one-on-one instruction. Well, Art Bergoso, the director, put an ad in because he wanted somebody to come stay overnight, because 80% of these kids were sneaking out at night and getting drunk, getting loaded, and getting high. And then they come back, and the next day they couldn't study, they couldn't function. And teachers were really angry and said, Art, so I went there and we tried that for a month. I was an overnight guy, and I was kind of the guardian of these kids, but it didn't work. I mean, these kids were sneaking out, or they had friends bringing their drugs. So after a month of that, I went to Art and said, Art, this isn't working. These kids are addicted and they need help. So he decided to open up an addiction program up the street. So 80% of the kids in the Lyrico home went to this addiction facility up the street to get help for their addiction. And that's where I worked. And then I got certified, and then I went to Hope Center, which is a DOI program. And then this whole time I'm working on my health, I started meeting with Dr. Fields, Jacqueline Fields in Fort Collins, very holistic physician, great lady. She's still my doctor. But she really is the one that convinced me, Joe, the diet's killing you. You got to get off the junk food and the junk you're eating, and the caffeine and the sugar. And that wasn't easy. That was not easy. But I gave up the sodas, I gave up the sugar, and trying to start eating healthy. And I didn't know how to cook. I didn't know. So it was like, at least I was going to the store and getting some healthy stuff they made instead of Kentucky Fried Chicken or McDonald's. And so that was that was part of my sobriety, that diet and healthy living that way. So my doctor friend who helped me in the beginning, Dr. Ken Ash, he was opening up an outpatient clinic for drug and alcohol addiction. He wanted me to join him and get involved with him. So I did. There was about 7 people that started it, and it was pretty traditional. And we had a pretty good success rate, mainly because we could stay connected with the patients. I think in an outpatient setting, they can stay connected with your facility and the counselors for a longer period of time. But it was about 15 years I was there, and I've been working on myself and getting off the cigarettes and starting to run a little bit. And then I started thinking, maybe, we could do something here, but they didn't want to go down that path because they were very traditional. Dr. Ash's traditional medication and antidepressants, things like that. So eventually I left there, and Dr. Barry Burns, a friend of mine who's since passed away, he got an incredibly rare disease, but he was a wonderful guy. He hooked me up with Ron Graham, who was my partner, because they were opening up a holistic clinic, and we partnered up and opened up Interbalance. Back then it was pretty rudimentary. Dr. Fields and Dr. McDonald were doing some very basic labs, and it was 3 days a week outpatient. And then it's over the last 18 years, it's grown to where we're at now. And we had our doctor, Dr. Groves, had to leave after about 3 years. He was our medical doctor. He had to he took a big job in Arizona at a hospital. And so then that's when Dr. Roger Billica came to Fort Collins, and he was opening up a holistic clinic. So we partnered up, and he was our medical director. And we started doing a lot more exotic testing, a lot more. We're doing glucose testing for our glucose test. We're looking at pyrroles and histamines. And then and finally, Dr. Billica brought his brother, William Billica, from Arizona, and he started working with our clients. And he's really the main person that works with our clients in our facility. So when I describe our treatment center, we call it holistic. And what we mean by that is that we have to treat the damage done by addiction to the mind, the body, the spirit, and the environment, and the emotions. All 5 of those elements have to heal for a person to fully recover from their addiction. The mind is, we have a mental health counselor that works. My thinking was, these drugs are the solution to my problem. I had no other solution. We have to get that thinking turned around, shifted over to, this is a healthy way to live a happy life, or a good life. It's the supplements, it's the exercise, healthy diet. So get them off the drug path and get them on a healthy path mentally. That's important, that they have to come to buy in to this is a way they can really feel good. But we also have to work with their thinking, because their thinking can be very negative at times when they come to us. And so they have to, their thinking is, pretty negative. I've screwed up my life, I've failed, and so our mental health counselor teaches them how to put more positive thoughts into their thinking through meditation, through affirmation, and those kinds of things. The biochemical piece is really important. That's all the lab tests we do. We're doing hormones, we're doing histamines, we're doing pyrols, we're doing genetic testing now. We're finding the MTHFR 1298 gene, about 40% of our addicted people have it. It's something you can't fix, but what it means, if you have that gene, you have not been able to break down folic acid, to absorb that into your body. Folic acid is incredibly important for neurotransmitters in the brain, and then a lot of other functions for the heart. And the solution, because you can't fix that gene, is you just take, when you find that, we give them a methylated form of folic acid, meaning it's already broken down. Now they don't need that gene to operate. We're finding a CBS gene, which is more of a biopterin issue. They're not getting a biopterin, so they can't convert tyrosine to dopamine. Again, the same problem. We can't fix that gene. We just give them a natural biopterin. We use a lot of vitamins, minerals, amino acids in our facility, IV drips of vitamins and minerals. Diet is incredibly important. They have to start getting off the sugar and the caffeine, and they have to start eating. We feed them 3 natural organic meals a day, and they get educated. They come to educational classes. They work with 6 different counselors with different specialties. The spiritual piece is to me probably one of the most important things, because that's what's going to keep these people sober for the rest of their life. When I came here from Southern California, my addiction had destroyed every relationship I ever had. When I got here, I could not feel love for anything. I hated myself. I didn't have anybody in my life. I didn't feel love for anything. I didn't have any animals. I wasn't going out into nature, because when I was drinking, I'd be all drunk or high on something. So I lost that connection. And any human being on this planet, to have a quality life, to have a meaningful life, we have to have a lot of strong, spiritual, loving connections. In other words, we need to be able to feel love for ourselves. We need to be able to feel love for our family, our animals, nature, our friends, maybe a connection with a higher power. It's these connections that give meaning to our life. Drug and alcohol addictions actually damage and sever these special connections. So we have a Harvard-trained, UCLA-trained psychologist that takes people out on a nature walk for a day, and he explores in nature, what were these connections like before you got into your addiction? Did you feel love for your family? Did you have an animal you loved? And then what happened to these connections while you're in your addiction? And then when they come back, the rest of the time in the program, they work with a spiritual advisor to help them continue to look at, how do you get these connections back? How do you start loving yourself? How do you start forgiving yourself? You're not the cause of this. You're a victim of this illness, just like cancer victims. And then they work on helping them look at what they need to do down the road to heal all their relationships. And then the environment, we look at where they're going home to. Some young people, maybe they need to go to sober living. They've got to have a safe, healthy environment when they leave our facility. And our life coach helps them work on what that's going to be. Emotional, it's interesting, because a lot of people don't understand. One of the other damages addictions does is if you remember, I started using at 14. I got sober at 34. When I was 34, I had the emotional development of about an 18-year-old. Drug and alcohol addiction starts stunting our emotional development. In other words, we're not learning how to deal with anger, frustration, love, relationships. We're using chemicals. And so when we get sober, we do feel like we've lost a lot of emotional development. So we help our clients with that in our program with the counselors. And so that's what we do. I know we're at about 30 minutes, so I don't want to go.
Well, I think what's really neat, though, I mean, you went through the whole spectrum of what you do, and you touched on it. I think what most people don't even begin to realize, because like you were talking about the biochemical, and without addressing the biochemical imbalance, that's the huge component I feel that is missing within most facilities, most places. So when they talk about a holistic, like I said, most places say, well, we have holistic, we've got yoga, we have aromatherapy, and they bring in someone like me who does energy healing, but they're not dealing with, and I've had people say to me, oh, well, you're kind of into that whole hippie thing. And I says, actually, it's not a hippie thing. It's really actually a very scientific thing.
Yes.
Really what we're talking about is a very scientific approach to addiction recovery. A holistic approach gets kind of gets put in a category as being, you know, almost like a hippie movement. It really isn't. It really is a scientific movement that is dealing with it in a whole different level. And
one of the things, if you think about this, many years ago, the AMA classified alcoholism as a physical disease. It's the only disease that I know of that alcoholism now is the only disease I know of that they treat with talk therapy, traditional treatment. You don't treat a physical disease with just talk therapy. All other diseases, it's their physical intervention. And you're absolutely right. It's incredible that they haven't been able to see that and understand that, wait a minute, if we don't help our clients with the depression, the anxiety, the difficulty sleeping, all of that stuff, when they leave here, they're going to continue to want to self-medicate. And just like I did. Now, luckily, I was able to read that book, that Dr. Rhoda Barnes book, and that kind of triggered my path. Most people don't do that. Most people just suffer, or they go to their doctor and they get on antidepressants or anxiety medications. And you're right. It's unbelievable that we don't see that we have to treat the whole person. That's what holistic means to me. Absolutely.
Well, I think hearing your entire program in just this little brief time, what's wonderful is that anybody listening to this will have a link to Joe's treatment facility, but on his website, which I felt was really wonderful, because so often nobody knows, you know, when they're Googling treatment facilities and they're at that point of saying, I need to get help, no one knows how to go about asking the questions that are pertinent. And on your website, it talks about the top questions, but you also answer those questions as to what your facility does. Those are questions every person needs to ask any treatment facility that you're going to seek. Because most of the time, people, their number one is, you know, they look at the beautiful pictures and they're by the ocean and what kind of recreation. Oh, this looks really pretty, and they've got great yoga. But I'm here to tell you that without addressing these issues, which I addressed these on my own, I was like you. I mean, I went through traditional, and then afterwards I said, this has to change. There has to be a movement of change that has to occur. And what am I going to do? And I started with myself. What am I going to do to make those things change for myself? Now, I think for myself and my own personal beliefs, undoubtedly, there was people that were placed in my path and this knowledge was given to me. I feel an incredible sense of responsibility to do whatever I can to promote this knowledge, because I refuse to see any more people die based off of an ignorance that this is not treatable in more than one way. And that it's very doable. It doesn't mean that it's not something you have to educate yourself, and that's what you were saying, is your program is one of education, because it's not that simple where we get to just sit down and say, well, you know, we're going to talk about this more. No, you actually have to make efforts to figure out what it is your body is missing. That's part of what I've done in being involved within the Alliance and educating myself as to what my areas were and what it is nutrition-wise that you need to do. You know, so that's what's wonderful. So when you go on to...
One of the things, give an example of what you're talking about, is for the last 18 years, all of our patients come in and they do a 4-hour glucose tolerance test. And they come in fasting, they drink sugar, and we watch their blood level go up, down, down to low, a lot of symptoms with hypoglycemia. Of the last 18 years, and I'm just talking about alcoholics because they are much more prone to hypoglycemia. Every alcoholic that's come to us, except 2, has been diagnosed with hypoglycemia, mild, moderate, severe, pre-diabetic. So to me, it's a no-brainer. If that's a fact from these lab tests that we're getting, it's not something we're just saying off the top of our head. These are actual labs we have, that every treatment center in the country should be educating their patients, their clients on blood sugar and what the sugar does and what the junk food does, and teaching them to eat healthy meals. Because when clients leave and they've got that blood sugar imbalance and they go continuing to eat sugar and all that stuff. They're gonna have that roller coaster ride, and they're gonna relapse. Absolutely. So that was a great.
And that's what I said. I was the classic alcoholic, where the morning would start, and I would work all day long, and I would have strong conviction first thing in the morning that I was not going to drink by the evening. Would work all day, and about 3 o'clock I hadn't eaten all day. And of course, by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, my strong resolve that I was not going to drink all of a sudden started to change into a great justification of all the stress that I had during the day. Now, did I ever connect that with low blood sugar?
No.
No, I didn't. But this education process has taught me that's an absolute vital part of keeping me in recovery, is keeping my blood sugar level.
And what you are going through, unbeknownst to you, because as human beings, we will always seek something to alleviate how bad we feel. And the only solution we had at the time was more alcohol or more drugs. And so that's a natural response. And I'll give you an example. And then we don't want to run too long, but can you imagine Mother Teresa, and she's in a car accident? She got a broken leg and her bones sticking out, and here comes a counselor and an ambulance. Who do you think she's going to want to go with? Get me to the hospital. She's not going to be very spiritual and loving. She's in a lot of pain. Get me to the hospital. Now later, she may want to talk about it, talk therapy, talk to a counselor about the accident, but what you have to do is you got to get the pain down. So when clients come to us and they're severely deficient in B vitamins, folic acid, they've got hypoglycemia, they got other stuff going on, we have got to work with them to deal with those issues, or you're not going to get that physical pain down.
And the big difference, too, what your center does with the education in comparison, was there was nothing wrong with the traditional setting. They were a responsible, beautiful, wonderful center that I went to. The big difference was most everyone was handed bags of candy. Rock stars, they were slamming rock stars. Of course, they smoked, they vaped. So the education process, though, I got this wonderful spiritual basis, and like you said, the withdrawal from it. But once I was released, and you're back in that same momentum, without this education process, you're right, that statistic goes huge as far as people relapsing. And so that's what I always say. This is relapse prevention. This is real recovery, because we're talking about healing every aspect of it. And the biochemical aspect is never addressed, short of most people walk in abusing some, walk out with a host of prescriptions to deal with. And that was what was prescribed to me. I was basically sat across from a psychiatrist, and he says, well, do you want to drink? Or do you want to take a sleeping pill because you don't sleep?
Right. Mm.
So no one ever brought up, okay, well, my serotonin levels were so off. My blood sugar was so off. There was a reason I couldn't sleep. And once those things were addressed, I never thought that could ever be addressed in diet or in a supplement that was as simple as taking something and literally waking up the next day and saying, so this is what it means to sleep.
Right.
So I love, there's so few very limited centers out there that do anything to this level. I would encourage everyone to go on to your website, which will be linked to this interview, so that you can take that test and you can go on, and when you're seeking help for someone, make sure that you're asking those fundamental questions, because it will greatly increase that person's chance of recovery.
Let me I'll say one thing, and I know we've got to go. The way I describe it is that good treatment centers and 12-step programs can start us off on sobriety. They can get us off the drugs and the alcohol, but it's not until we do all this other biochemical restoration work that we're going to be in true recovery. So I really encourage anybody out there who's in recovery, but they're still struggling, you can go find an ACAM physician. And these are physicians who go outside of traditional medicine. They're looking for things that we look for in our treatment center, and they can help you. They can look at your hormones. They can look at your genetic profile. If you find a good ACAM physician, they can help you, and you don't have to get on pharmaceutical medication. Now, our doctor also believe if somebody goes through our program, they try everything we've got and they're still depressed, then they will turn to a pharmaceutical drug, an antidepressant, a better antidepressant, not Effexor. Effexor is very hard to get off of, but they will try. They're not going to deprive somebody if what we try working isn't going to totally get it. So
right. And that's what I always say too. We're not here to tell anybody, hey, you need to take yourself off of that. But what I am here to say is that you can greatly increase just your well-being and your ability to know whether or not, and you can assess that with your doctor later once you start being able to address these things on a biochemical basis and on a nutritional basis. And most people aren't having anything related to a whole food diet, don't even know where to even begin with that. And that's part of what's wonderful about what the Alliance is doing in this education that they're trying to promote. And there's pioneers like yourself. I mean, this isn't new to you. By no means is this new to you, but what's amazing to me is how often we'll bring this up, and it's absolutely new to most of the population out there, and certainly within the addiction world, it's new. Most of the population is still under the impression a holistic approach is yoga and medicinal, you know, hey, I got aromatherapy.
Right.
The holistic really is about dealing with your brain, and we're talking about brain chemistry and all those aspects, because without addressing it, like you said, once you address that level, it brought you to another whole level of healing. So, you know, I love everything that you stand for, because you don't negate anything that's beautiful about the programs that are existing out there, such as AA. And 12-step, and you give a lot of credibility to where it brought you. But it's also, like you said, it's like having a broken bone and only addressing and getting a prayer over it and not addressing the logistics of how you need to fix it.
What 12-step programs are, and they were designed not to be treatments for alcoholism. They are a support group to help people not drink, and they're very effective to doing that. And I'll tell you today, just people out there struggling with addiction, that there is hope. When I came here 40 years ago, I was hopeless. I didn't have anything in my life, no future, nobody in my life. Today I've got a wonderful family. I've got wonderful friends. I play golf with friends. I have recovery friends.
Well, you look fabulous. When you said you were 71, I hardly could believe it. I was like, dang, I can't believe, because obviously that clean living. A lot
of years of vitamins, 36 years of sobriety. Not putting alcohol and drugs in my system is the key, but then taking care of my health and continuing to look at things. I just found out 2 years ago when we started looking at genetics that I have the 1298 gene. So now I have to take methylfolate the rest of my life, which is no big deal, but it's helping me a lot. So yes. All righty.
Wonderful. Joe, thank you for taking the time to be a part of Addiction Recovery Revolution. Love your program, love everything that you offer for the addiction world today, for people that are seeking for treatment. And the information you gave was great, just because anyone seeking out there and wanting, you know, all the different forms that they can have. Obviously, there's very limited people like yourself. I mean, I will say that there's limited who will go in, but I love that, you know, someone can go on, read what you're about, and actually ask those questions. And I would really challenge everyone to really ask that of the centers that you're going to and seeking treatment, not saying wrong about anyone, but this is truly the responsible approach to giving someone the best opportunity for long-term recovery.
Thank you, Debbie. I appreciate the work you're doing, trying to spread the message.
No, we're going to do it every single day. We're going to keep trying. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.